The Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium presents Nils Peterson and Ken Weisner, recorded live via Zoom on Sunday, October 11th, 2020.
Well, welcome to our sixth Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium Zoom-based reading. This is the sixth one we've done as we continue to shelter in place during the coronavirus pandemic. For those of you who don't know, the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium, it is an affiliation of poets in the Monterey Bay area, or formerly in the Monterey Bay area, and has been presenting readings for many years, carrying on a tradition established by the former local chapter of the National Writers Union. We're on Facebook at Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium. You can like us there, and we will make sure that you stay liked. The dean and the driving force behind the consortium is John Lowy, who's with us today. Thank you, John. He's in the middle of my monitor, so I trust he's there for you folks, and he's joining us from La Selva Beach. John's the man who pulls all this together. We thank John for that. Today we're going to have the poetry of two outstanding and gifted poets. They're each making a return to our reading series, Nils Peterson and Ken Weisner. Each will read for 20 to 25 minutes. It's going to be a wonderful afternoon, so I would invite you to sit back, enjoy a cup of coffee or tea or a snack or a glass of wine or whatever you'd like, and just enjoy on this gorgeous, it's beautifully sunny and bright here in Monterey County, and I trust elsewhere in the country for you too. So enjoy the afternoon. Our first poet, I want to talk about him a little bit, is Nils Peterson. He's coming to us from Seattle. And he's Professor Emeritus in English at San Jose State. Nils, in 2009, was chosen as the first Poet Laureate of Santa Clara County. And he's also been the recipient of the Silicon Valley Creates Award for poetry and for teaching. He's published poetry, science fiction, and articles on subjects as varied as golf and Shakespeare. His chapbooks include Here Is No Ordinary Rejoicing, Driving a Herd of Moose to Durango, For This Day, The Revenge of the Sox, and For This Day, number 2. A collection of his poems, The Comedy of Desire, edited and introduced by Robert Bly, was published by the Blue Sofa Press. And Nils was involved with Robert Bly when he gave his seminars and workshops at Asilomar down here in Monterey County. And I went to one of those a long, long time ago, at least 20 years ago. Nils's newest collection, A Walk to the Center of Things, which he has with him, and from which you'll be reading somewhat, Nils? Yeah. Great. His newest collection was published by Poetry Center San Jose, and Jane Hirshfield wrote about it and said, varied in subject and manner, his poems embody a deep pleasure and wonder in being alive, and they bring us into the company of a larger life. An e-chapbook of Nils's, titled Talk in the Reading Room, was published by Wordrunner Press early in 2014. He still is writing, and as a sideline, he's been singing bass in chorales for more than 60 years. I don't know if we can coax him into singing for us today.
No, don't tempt me.
And you erase the red line through it.
Yeah. So, folks, and thank you for everybody who's just recently joined us. Nils, over to you.
Okay. Well, and I have one more book after that called All the Marvelous Stuff, which Bill Cozzini, who's sitting there, helped edit, and it's not bad. In fact, it's good. So I'm going to start by reading a poem from it. It's next to the last poem, but it's a good one to start with, called Not With a Bang. There was not even nothing before there was anything. Then everything entered all at once, a great chord, all of the notes and all of the almost notes between, yes, all at once. So the universe began not with percussion, but the whole orchestra, tuning in a marvelous cacophony before the show. Then Maestro Space-Time entered, opened the score of whatever will be, and raised his baton. So. The next poem sort of goes, continues like that. I spent the Christmas Eve, it's called Christmas Eve by the Sea 2017. And Christmas Eve 2017 was spent at Asilomar and with my wife. And we had just a great time there. And I was sitting there, they have the great big fireplace, and sitting there, and memories of the people that had passed came to me, like the ghost of Marley and all. But these are good ghosts. So that's the background here. Christmas Eve by the Sea, 2017. Behind me, the sun burns its way into the sea, but I face a fire crackling in a great stone hearth, not quite big enough to roast an ox, but big enough. Tonight, old friends stopped by to visit. Steve and Earl and Herb and, yes, Denise, Gertrude, Virginia, and Marilyn Lopreet, who took me to the preview of West Side Story, a perk from her job at the Rockefeller Foundation. Each hangs for a moment, a light on the tree of memory. I think to myself, we are the sum total of what is incalculable. And then wonder what star I followed to bring me by the sea, Christmas Eve 2017. Then think again, it's taken the universe 15 billion years to get me here, and I'm grateful. And now I'm going to read 2 verses of a poem that's a total failure. I'm going to read sections 1 and 4 and then explain why I'm reading this failure to you. I'm reading a poem. Its 12th word is flux. The word colors the poem like dye injected into a vein. I'm reading in a house by the sea. The water between here and the far shore seems calm, yet there is some unseen energy. The woman in the poem is lying by a man. They have had sex. He seems asleep. She is filled with longing and desire. Most sex, she says, induces that state. Her gaze is drawn out of the window to the night sky where the stars gather in the patterns of summer, the story of summer. I wonder if what she says is true. I seem not to be able to say no. The woman in the poem begins to think of a story, the one about man and woman she learned from her parents. Love is a lightning. You're struck once and then your story is finished. I turn from the page, think, most of life is a footnote then, like the happily ever after in the old stories. I think of my story. I stood with 2 other waiters by the croquet court at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. A girl woman, also a waiter, walked by in Bermuda shorts. Her legs glistened. Want to play? Yes, she said. I woke this morning more than half a century into my long footnote. So I've never been able to make the poem work, but that is 2 sections of it. And the reason I'm reading it today is that the woman poet that I'm reading and sort of riffing off is Louise Gluck, who just became our Nobel Prize winner. And so I thought that would be a good bringing of her into the talk today. Okay, where are you? Here you are. I'm going to read from the book that Robert Bly edited. It's got a lovely picture of Matisse on front. It's called The Comedy of Desire. I wanted to call it The Heart Wants What It Wants, but I think both titles are good, but he won since he was the editor. This is called Family Tree. I'm still sort of trying to enter the story and shape and movement of my life here. So, Family Tree. I picture her, my great-great-great-grandmother, say, in the long Arctic summer dusk, where the light, refusing to give over, keeps on to midnight and beyond. This woman, bored with husband, farmer's wives, bored with gleaming copper and bright aprons, irritated with the neat parlor freed only for the prison of the pastor's visit. This woman longs for darkness. She's done her chores, swept the kitchen, prepared the dough, milked the cows, fed the chickens, hauled the water, and still the light will not be quiet. So she says to herself, "Jag tror jag ska gå till skogen." I think I'll go into the woods. Kan hända jag möter ett troll. Perhaps I'll meet a troll. She had heard of women carried off for troll wives. Even that would be better, to be one of the queer ones whose eyes never rest on things but look just beyond, whose hearts settle at last into real stone, instead of just the pain of stone. So she takes off her apron, fixes her chair, and sets off down a road that dwindles to a trail that sneaks into a wood. For a while she whistles, because boys can whistle, but girls must sing. But as the trees close over and in, the only sound she makes is the little catch of breath that happens at the base of the throat when the heart beats too quickly. She shivers in her thin summer dress as the cold, lingering close to the ground from the winter before, reaches up to her and at her. At last the trail ends out of itself, and she stands irresolute, weight thrusting on one foot, then the other. Should she press forward where no one has been before? Maybe it was silly. Maybe she should turn around. Maybe there are no trolls. She stands there deep in wish as will can carry, until a low rumble and she turns to an upswelling of blackness that rears and spreads its paws so wide, the rank blanket of underfur seems a door she can enter, a dark door which closes fiercely around as an immensity gathers her into itself. At last, it drops back to its forepaws and lumbers off, impervious to thorn or thicket, or the soft sobbing of my grandmother, now just another hurt girl sitting amidst the ruin of her clothing, able to think of nothing else to do but go back home and wait for the year to fall about her. All winter, she thickened sleepily in the warm care of her husband's pride in having fathered. When the lambs dropped in spring, she bore a lump all suet and hair, which she licked into human shape. In her after sleep, she called out, "Bear," and her husband said, "Bjorn." "Yes, we'll call him Bjorn." Bjorn is a Swedish word for bear. I found myself wanting to, the short version of how this poem came about, I found myself wondering, thinking I'd like to hibernate, and then thinking, well, why would you like to hibernate? And then answering, you have bear blood in you. And then the next question is, how did the bear blood get there? And this is my answer to that question I asked of myself. Oh, yes, I want to read one poem. My wife died recently of ALS, and so I'm thinking of her now and again. And I'll read this little short poem for her. I have several, but I'll just read this little short one. It's called Bedtime. If we have quarreled, Our bodies wait patient as horses. At last their owners, huffy and proud, set off, leaving the sweet beasts to each other. They turn, nuzzle, and flank to flank speak the eloquent, touching language of the dumb. Well, I have another one that continues on right on the next page, so I'll read it too. So it's called Morning Early. Almost awake, bedclothes settled about like clouds at the edge of summer. On the horizon, my hand floats on the warm sea of your body. How did it get there? Is it off on its own? Or has it some mysterious charter from the king, some errand that will save all of France? How free it rides, easy on the suck and swell of your breathing. So. I see I'm going to have to be quick here, and I will. There'll be, promise. I have a new book coming out, which will include this poem from the old book. This is called Driving a Herd of Moose to Durango, and it's mostly poems about Robert Bly and his friends and cohorts, and some of it takes place. We used to, for almost 30 years, he came down and did a weekend every spring, every early spring, late winter at a Silmar, which I helped put on, and he would stay at my house and fill it very, very full. But I would drive him down, and I thought I'd just read this little poem about it was like. This is at Point Lobos. Two big men walk the rain-sluiced headlands looking for what needs looking at. Between squalls, a hard gusting wind shoves the flat of its hand against them over and over. One wears an ankle-length black coat which blows and flaps steadily about his rear like the wings of a manta ray. The cliff is crumbling, rock, path, ankle twisting and uneven, yet this one picks up his feet and lets them fall, confident the earth will provide. The other wears a short, waterproof jacket, which manages to funnel the rain back to the seat of his pants. That one feels his way with long, tentative feet, steadying himself with a hand or hauling himself up with two. Yet both come to a high place, above a tangled slope reaching down to a sweep of sand where the breakers where the broken, grumbling waves still fierce swell again, crash, retire. There, dead still, 2 arm lengths of close, a young hawk hovering against the gale. For a full minute, the two watch it watching, caught in its intense hunger. Then the hawk hurtles out of sight, up again, nothing in beak or claw, circling high and away, looking hard across the heath for daily bread. I'll read a couple of quite recent poems, things I've been working on now, and actually I'll read 3. This was written for a fun. Those of you who are older will be at home in this poem. Dear Anna, years ago you sent me the heart meditation of, gosh, the man's name has just flown out of my head. But he wrote a book on silence, which I've loaned out so I can't put my hand on it and get it back. The name, that is. The book is yellow, but anyway, if you still have it, the heart meditation in the bowels of your computer somewhere, I'd love to get it again. Hope things are good with you there. They are here, except for my increasing difficulty in walking, though my skill at circumlocution, the talk around a word desperately hoping someone can follow me, gets better. I was unable to come up with monastery the other day, though I was able to say it was the opposite of nunnery, though no one was able to comprehend what I was saying even then. They were probably not good at charades either. Aha, his first name was Robert. Aha, Sardello, the long safari out of darkest memory bank accomplished. So some of you will know that. So two recent poems. It's called The Need to Know. When the hot coyote howls at night, the grasses by the wandering roads find out the state of his heart. They want to know, as do chipmunks, lizards, ants. And the loon, he's telling the moon, even the stars that spring has reached the pond. Everything wants to know everything. So unless you tell the bees that the one with whom they've shared their honey will not come again, they'll be as angry as their cousin wasps. In the old days, the good wife would hang a bit of black cloth on the hives, or the young heir would knock gently on their honey frames and whisper, "Old Einar has gone." Then he'd go to the barn to tell the cows. They too need to know. This is entitled, Well It Is. The slow things that making their slow way across the sidewalk. The worms, the slugs, the small bugs with short legs and small feet. We'd like to help, but understand that help might prove fatal. The best we can do is wish them well on their journey and wonder why the other side of the sidewalk should seem so attractive. And then there's the beautiful little spider in the middle of an enormous web just outside the doorway where someone is sure to go. We wish it well. And yes, also the fly she is trying to catch. We wish it well too, though that makes life complicated. Well, it is, in fact, isn't it? So that's a couple of new ones. And then I'm going to end, well, let's see. Two poems from the Odyssey. I think I have time for this. This was called Penelope. This time it is Penelope who goes off, while Odysseus stays home to mind the kingdom, not to a war, but to the wedding of a special girlhood friend married off to a barbarian to seal a treaty. Then things kept coming up for 20 years. Not monsters so much, though sometimes monstrous things. This is a life, after all. The god she angered was Zeus, who preferred that women stay at home, but he largely ignored her, having his own affairs to tend to. So mostly she lost her handmaidens through natural causes, cholera, accident, love. She lost none to Scylla or Charybdis, giving herself time to sail around. The sirens, they ignored her. No need to waste music on a sister. Oh yes, there was a man on whose island she spent some time. Though it was clear he was no immortal, sometimes he made her feel as if she might be. Towards the end, tired of the gypsy life, she traded her last jewel for passage home. The curious Phoenicians thought this dusty, graying woman claiming to be queen a little daft as they rowed her ashore. But queen she was, for an old woman curtsied and an old dog, for once not barking, stretched out its gray head. At the palace, she found her husband besieged by women wanting to be queen. Odysseus had been faithful in his own way, favoring one woman, then another, weaving relationships at night, which he undid in the morning. He had always expected his wife to come back. At her entrance, the suitors sniffed at this unlikely female. But when the king rose and bowed, they turned, gathered perfumes, robes, ornaments, and scattered like bats at dawn to isles where royalty might be a little less canny. That night, the husband lay down in their ancient bed, each wondering how much they should say to each other. And this one is about that ancient bed that Odysseus made for Penelope. when they first got married. And there's a big, long thing in the Odyssey about Odysseus making that bed. So this is about that. The bed. After he'd lain again with Penelope, this is when he's come home after the 20 years. After he'd lain again with Penelope, Odysseus, awake, listened to her gentle snore and smiled. He'd forgotten it, or maybe it had come while he was away. Restless, he found himself restless and wondering, at home, in the bed he'd made, yet restless. How many nights had he longed to be just here, when sea-wracked or even caught in the arms of a goddess? He rose, padded out to the palace garden. The moon shone so bright the trees cast shadows. Those saplings they'd planted when Telemachus was born towered over the walls. The sun he had not planted, the sons he had not planted, would never be. Young, he'd thought a life could have many voyages, but now he saw there was only one. And then a last poem. This is from a museum. This is from a museum exhibit at the San Jose Museum of Art. This is called the Great Hall of Mirrors. I went in, the room was just filled with hundreds of rear view mirrors from old cars. And it's quite astonishing to go in and see that room. So this is about the Great Hall of Mirrors. Once I wrote, on the mule of time we sit backwards. It carries us forward anyway, although things appear a little askew. Now I walk into a room with 100 rear view mirrors from lost and forgotten vehicles and think, at my age, I'm on no mule, but in a fast car, on a freeway, exceeding the speed limit. And think again, even the sun is 8 minutes ago. And think again, consciousness is a rear view mirror. Whatever you see has been already. Whatever you see has been already. Okay, that's where we are. And that's my final poem.
Thank you, Nils. That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Just the last line that struck me, consciousness is a rear view mirror.
Yeah.
You know, the Zen philosophers would have a field day with that one. And it's so accurate. And I loved at the very beginning in your poem, with a bang, the maestro raised his baton. That's what you did at the beginning of this reading. And you conducted us through a wonderful series of your poems. Thank you very much for that.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you, John, for asking me again.
Thank you. If anybody has any thoughts or comments for Ken, feel free to unmute and speak, or otherwise we'll just move on. I'm sorry, not for Ken, for Nils. We'll move on now to our next poet then, Ken Weisner, who's in his backyard in the Santa Cruz area with some lovely redwoods behind him. Ken continues to teach English at De Anza College, and he advises both the student and the national editions of the Red Wheelbarrow, which if you haven't had a chance to enjoy the Red Wheelbarrow, you've been missing something, so go ahead and do it. He coordinates with the Poetry Center San Jose the Red Wheelbarrow Poetry Prize, and Cindy, who's here somewhere, does that with him. There she is. Ken has published 3 volumes of his own poetry with Hummingbird Press, including Anything on Earth in 2010 and Cricket to Star 2019. And I take it, Ken, we may be hearing something from both of those?
I'm reading all new poems today.
Oh, all new poems. Oh, what a treat. That's wonderful.
No, I don't know. I hope so.
I'm sure it will be. Ken's poems have appeared in the past few years, several years really, in Perfume River Poetry Review, Catamaran, Caesura, 9 Mile, Porter Gulch Review. Where's David? There's David. And Frenzy. And Ken also teaches poetry writing at Salinas Valley State Prison. And he's on the board of the nonprofit prison writing advocacy collective, Right to Write Press. And I don't know if you folks know much about that, but there are some marvelous things that come out of that. And I don't know, Ken, whether you'll be talking anything about that, but it's really a wonderful thing to be doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us this afternoon. And now, Ken, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I want to thank Bob, but also Jennifer and John, who and everyone who came today to this poetry matinee, and Nils, who's an impossible act to follow. I was hoping they would do it the other way. It's one of the greatest voices in the world, Nils's voice. So the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium has been around a long time, and maybe next year it'll be back in Old Capitol Books, which is such a classic little bookstore where they gather in the back, and they could stream it live, you know, in the future. Why not? The world has changed utterly. A digital beauty is born. So that joke was for Nils. I know he'll get that. But seriously, to see family and some great old friends here from around the country is extremely special. I'm excited. So I'm grateful to have a chance to read with Nils. You know, Maureen Draper and Helen Houghton published the Music Lovers Poetry Anthology in 2007. So I don't know if you can see that. There it is. And I can write it in the chat. But anyway, it's was one of the little highlights of my extremely modest poetry career to have done a bunch of readings for that book with Nils and others. So you know that Nils is a legend of Santa Clara County poets and teachers, and a champion of poetry and conveying the feeling in a poem. So I will put the book title in chat. He has a poem in there called For Charlene, I believe, which is an homage to your longtime choral conductor. Is that correct? Yeah. And it's he's an accomplished singer, as Bob already said. And I also really admired how Nils could hold his own quipping with Robert Bly at Asilomar, and how he created this richly layered poet-teacher life. I'm always just really watching people who succeed at that. So you can also friend him on Facebook, where he often posts poems from the Pacific Northwest. So, but enough about Nils. So I'm writing new poems, which is very humbling, and I've been doing it this summer. And so I decided to read new poems. So there's a ton of things I could do. I could read from books. I could talk about the prison project, but I decided, no, I'm going to read new poems. And so it's a little risky. I'm going to read a sampling, but I hope it's fun for you to be on that edge with me. I can't remember the last time I did a reading of all new work. Really, I can't actually remember that ever. Maybe a long time ago. So I'll start in a place, this place right here where I sit. So Becky and I moved into a home near woods close to town, very rich in bird life. So this was actually written last year. So I'm learning about birds. And well, what a feast. It's a universe I've been missing apparently until we got last few years. Hunger. First light, they find the feeder full. Chickadees with a swoop of war paint, finch pears, bruised from chest to crown, with garnet and blood. Ragged, plumed titmouse, steel, smoky gray, junco, hooded with shadow and charcoal. All prod for prize hulls of sunflower, extract the oily seed, dribble millet and sesame over the edge to towhees, ringnecks camped below in the dust. Larger creatures like too big for feeder black-tufted stellars, sapphire blue and licorice crown, flap madly, apparitions, so the perch door won't shut on their desire. Hooded oriole, darting ray of lemon like an intense memory, touches down at its feeder, quaffs honeyed melon, then disappears, tropical fish of the air. Early evening, tiny emerald-throated demigods tug long, perilous rafts. Swallows feast among cattle, an insect for every swoop. And at night, the great horned, silent flyer among the treetops, tiger of the sky, calls out, and others answer from afar. Everything is hunger. We turn in the canyons, fields, lit like dream, and a small mice scrabble in moonlight. So I worked pretty much like a dog last fall, and then my back went out twice, and then COVID hit, and then George Floyd was murdered, and Breonna Taylor, and then Trump got crazier and crazier, and then the wildfires, you know. So we each have our own 2020 story. Ours has actually been a privileged one. We kept our jobs, our homes, so far our health, and I wish the same for all of you. But life closed in, circumscribed, became urgent politically and challenging psychologically, not to mention teaching all online. But I still had my birds. So I began to hobble down to the meadow near the woods and commune with the owls. And then I'll admit I began talking to them. Let's say communing. So a year of birds turned into a year of owls. So I'd like to read you a few of those owl poems. You know, maybe within a year or two, it could be a chapbook. I don't know. I have friends here who write so fast, and I've never been that fast. I'd love it to end up a chapbook. If the owls are willing to grant enough inspiration, and of course permission, since these are co-authored. Now, you know who writes well about owls is Mary Oliver. So I made the mistake of reading her stuff, and then I had to go back to mine. Here's a sample of my current fledgling effort. They range wildly in tone and discourse. So they're mostly about the great horn that nest in our woods. All of them are. And sometimes the you is the owls, you'll figure it out. Sometimes, and some of them, the owls are they. Let me start with a wild one so you can see how it's evolved. And then I'll get to some shorter ones toward the end of the little section. This is a wild one. Save the planet, honor the resistance. I'm talking to my owls about the French resistance, about David and Regina Knaut, Abraham Polonsky, Adriana Scriabina, ferrying children, Simone Seguin, aka Nicole Minet, derailing trains at Chartres, rescuing shot down airmen, forging papers. How do we forge papers anymore? I want to know. Dmitry Amilakvari fighting in North Africa and with just a few men routing Rommel at Bir Hakeim. Women, Georgians, Armenians, Poles, Catholics, Jews, living the double lives of the tricolor. We foreigners have only one way to prove to France our gratitude, to be killed, Amilakvari says. They, the owls, Bubo virginianus, remain implacable and undistracted by the litany, the awful fact of the Vichy milice, the heroic beauty of the maquis. They, the owls, have lived here for millions of years, maybe 60 million. Once they were double the size they are today. Imagine their cries, their moonlit shadows, their noiseless 10-foot wings. They continue their examination of the meadow and the forest floor, and any incipient rustling, mice, voles, rabbits, snakes, any meaningful motion, scrabbling or scurrying on the field. You probably think this is an allegory. The owls are the Jews, perhaps, or the owls are the Poles, or the Maquis, or the owls are Yahweh, or the Jews are the mice, and the Nazis are the owls, or the snakes. I only know which names are in my mouth. The history is written. Ghosts and shadows are my brothers and sisters. A code, a password moves between them. So, you know, the poem started out sort of just writing about the owls in very simple ways, and they've ended up like this. So I don't know where they're going to end up next. But, I'll read this one here, which is about the 4th of July. So we had not had our fires yet, but there were all these fireworks going on. And, you know, I went out there and to be with them. Celebrating freedom in the urban-rural interface, July 4th, 2020. How you held your ground at the tops of the redwoods while the fireworks blasted, just a street away from the mortars and the bottle rockets. It didn't faze your gaze over the fresh-mown meadow rustling with life and moonlight. Bill Sadler, the Iraq war vet in our neighborhood, the one with PTSD, what he took to get through this night, cocooned in headphones, passed out on the basement couch, his dogs restless at his side. How powerful the hiss, concussion, the refrains, the woman he lost. You were hearing 10 times as good as a man's, yet holding your position in the tree crowns. Then 5 huge cannons, each followed by a hissing 10 times higher than a tree-tall chrysanthemum spray shower of blood and bubblegum, yellow gold and lucky green, all behind us, but flickering strong like a black light Saigon disco ball. So I see bright little illuminations of you like movie frame pulses. And that's it. You've had enough. Your wings strobe unfold in each of the 5 frames, and you take a flight deeper into the woods a while. Turns out you weren't immune to echoing nightmare, a strafe of false day. A little sad to see you go, sad yet thrilling to watch you rise in that surreal light like watching statuary come to life. The gargoyle fly from the cathedral. I want to tell you my feelings on military spending. The ones playing war, how often they are the ones who've been truly devastated. How lost a family, a village, a husband, a child. How often are they the ones who've been truly devastated? You'll outlast us. You'll be back hunting voles and field mice before the children are tucked in their beds, before the firecracker casings are even damp with dew. Okay. So I decided to start out with the wild ones, so now I can, now you'll be ready for anything, and now I'll just read some of the shorter ones. And they range, from sort of, well, you figure it out. This is just called September 27th, 2020. It sounded like an owl, but it was saying, "You ought to take a drug test, Sleepy Joe. Only drugs could have caused the discrepancy. His debate performances have been record-setting uneven." It was an owl. Another hooted in response. "If the president thinks his best case is made in urine, he can have it. We'd expect nothing less from Donald Trump, who pissed away the chance to protect the lives." And then I couldn't catch the rest, but heard it echo into the next canyon. It was an owl. Actually, 2 owls. This one's called Prayer. "Soon I will put on my face. Time itself but a whisper to protect us like sleep." That is what owls remind me of, that whisper. To have seen 2 together hunting in the moonlight, standing among treetops across the meadow, is like to have seen a single stitch of another world, darker, the ink of some owl alphabet. 2 embroidered iota. Thank you, but I saw none of it. So I'll read a couple more of these. My time is passing by fast, so I will just skip to this one. This is called The Nest. "One night before sleep, lying side by side, I was sure we were both great horned owls. Ridiculous. Only baby owls sleep lying down. But for that instant, the blanket of feathers over our long bodies, wings folded in, I saw we were owls. We had been in the water together that day, an excellent medium for metamorphosis, not entirely unlike the noiseless flying of the owl people. It was completely clear we had become great horned. I was very happy to know it." I'd like to read this one other one here. Maybe it's not as interesting, but it's about the fires. "After a week, the smoke clears. 1,000 homes, Felicia's home and studio, burnt to the ground. One home torched in Boulder Creek, while 10 feet away, Charles and Katie's doesn't burn. I offered them our guest room. I can't change the world very much. The firefighters are winning today. I wish them good fortune. A trick of the wind, a meadow happy with owls. There's a shooting star, crickets set the background beat, fledges interject, great horned elders hoot from the treetops. You'd think it was not burning insanely 10 miles away. Throughout the West, you'd think it was not burning like never before. How far might you fly in a dream? They call the whole forest home, the space they travel. Every so often, a firefighter finds a fledge and rescues him. Land hungers for fire, breathes to its own rhythm. For now, the one calls, the two answer. You know, about the fires, so I have other owl poems, but I want to skip ahead. So I'm going to skip ahead. This is a more traditional lyric poem about this guy. It's an elegy, for as far as I know, the only confirmed death in the massive mega fire near here. Some of you, my friends who were here, are from Iowa and other places, New York. So I just, you know, they wondered about our fire, and indeed it destroyed 1,000 homes in our county in August. Most of you know this very well. I read about the man's death in a wonderful portrait of him that was published in the New York Times. Maybe someone knows if anyone else died in that fire. But anyway, as far as I know, and it was a wonderful portrait of an eccentric, wonderful person. This is called Second Hand. Yesterday, Tad Jones lost his way on Last Chance, drove instead into the fire that vaporized the windows of his van. 1,000 homes. He was a gentleman prone to silence, the way a forest keeps time. For 20 years, he lived among deer without speaking in his one-room cabin. In the woods, he fed the animals, more than he fed himself, for the greater part of life. Worked on anger, for the self wants desperately what it wants. Try a grassy sencha, new leaves, sit quietly to face the astronomic cold, the loss, wife, family, home, country, language, way of life. Fall a while between clock ticks, edges into the silence that stretches into years. The smallest cabin, break of day, the jay, the brown creeper, sound of the wind in the trees. Words returning, words wrestled with all night, like Jacob with the angel. So I'm also dealing with political fury, like many of you are, by writing, and this many of you are probably not doing, by writing hip-hop poems. Oh, I hope you're laughing. So I hope it becomes a chapbook too, or maybe I'll just bury these in my backyard. So I apologize in advance to every true hip-hop poet who might be here with us today. But I'm so interested in how performance poems can also be page poems. I just can't be uninterested in that. It fascinates me. So it seems like a false dichotomy, but it's a tricky one. Anyway, my friend David reminds me to be compassionate. But in these poems, more of a Dorothy Parker ice pick. They're persona poems. This one's called Troll's Confession. So you know what kind of troll that is, Facebook troll. Troll's Confession. I was on Disgrace Book, Truth Days Without a Trace book. Behind my VPN, you wouldn't harass me again. No redeeming grace book, no values in place book. Where my theories on race took hold your face like a fish hook, the fibers that brace your base shook. Oh, I was a graced crook. Short order hot lies in your face, cook. I would put you in your place, schnook. Use the uppercase typeface to scream in your face. Look, every place a place to a base. Look, I was the hot money in the click race, crook. Muddy the waters any place with disinfo, subspace, gobbledygook. I cut to the chase, left you here unlaced, forsook, defaced your hymn book, mainlining, hiding, while the empire space under your skin shook. So I was going to read one more of those, but I don't know about time. Is passing so fast.
You got some time, Ken.
Do I have like 10 minutes?
You got 8 or 10 minutes. Go for it.
Oh, I'll read the other one. I don't know. Okay. So this one is from, these are all called call center songs, like the call center, you know. And this one is the call center from the big bank, Wells Fargo Bank. I'll tell you the inside dope. I'll just read you this one part of it. I guess, and this is the call center guy, right? Call center song. Guess I have to be your failure, jailer. It's a rig jig, whirly gig. You zag, I zig, you bitch. I intone, you moan again. I hang up the phone. Oh, whoops, we got disconnected. So sorry if your life was negatively affected. We'll be right with you to get this corrected. Just let it out, but no, we'll never meet. I'm anonymous. I'm the belly of the hippopotamus. Can't rob what's bottomless. Can't sue what's rotten. We own too many buildings in Los Angeles. We control the megatropolis. Yes, I'm a fatalist. You want to know what name it is, whose fault it is? We built it, sis. So I must be the wrong guy to ask. You think you won the lottery, Gus? You just had a loan with us. So I'll kind of close the last part of the reading. I'll do, I want to read one occasional poem and then a couple of lyrics at the end if there's time. So the occasional poem I want to read now is for Dorothy. Is Dorothy here? I think she's here under Becky's, I hope she's here. I'm looking, just a second. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, it says, yeah, she's, anyway, I'm just gonna assume she's here. So she's 91 and a terrific musician and pianist. And as Mother's Day approached, so she stayed with us for a little more than a month during the pandemic, which was really a joy, you know. So as Mother's Day approached, one morning she confided in me that although her mother had deeply admired her talent, she taught piano professionally for maybe 50 years, and Dorothy created her career during a time when opportunities for women were not as open as they are now. So she's 91 now. So, and for much of that time was a single mom teaching piano. So anyway, she's a wonderful musician. Anyway, she confided to me that her mother admired her, but never hugged her. So I had to write this for her on Mother's Day, and I hope she's still here to hear it. If the owls didn't put her to sleep, maybe she's still there. So for Dorothy Roberts, Mother's Day 2020. This is Becky's mom. And then I just would hear her playing the piano every day. So you're going to hear all the stuff. You'd walk through the room and she'd be playing this or that or the other thing, just like crazy. So I thought I heard Jimmy Crack Corn. Yes. And then Gollywog's Cakewalk. There's on top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese. I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed, followed by Strauss waltzes, Chopin, a Bach prelude, the Italian concerto. And today, The Happy Farmer by Robert Schumann. That you, Dorothy, played for the first time just a mere 85 years ago. And Schumann wrote down for his son just a mere 85 years before that. And don't get me wrong now, a mere 85 years before that, we were a British colony. Can it be just 3 grandmothers ago we were still fighting redcoats? Give me liberty, give me death, and the French were still in the thrall of Louis XVI, and a mere 2 grandmothers ago, half of Americans still owned slaves, and only 1 grandmother ago, a woman could not vote, not even to save her own life. And think how our meek lives carry and record all those wounds and shadows, the birds of history as the birds of forgiveness. And you were loved wholly by the alphabet, the ants and beetles and worms of words and the whole embrace of the canopy of trees, the vast sprouts of 16th notes and the vines of clefs, quarter note plums and the plump half note cabbages and cauliflower and tomatoes and orioles flying in commas and apostrophes and the little trills of sparrows and the wings of birds and books and all the adagios of afternoon, lupin and drooping oak appoggiaturas, arpeggios spreading spring pollen, staining in keys of many colors, G and D and F. Apples fall to you in glissandos, crisp birds on the wires of staves. Shaman sings, we all sing in what mysterious form? To be loved as mother, loved by mother. The metronome just gives and gives and gives, artesian, each second tick of childhood scores the body as if your mother, who so admired you, your long dead mother held you and stroked your brow only at night and only while you slept. So I wonder sometimes how close we get to truth in our lives, in our poetry, in our language, in our relationships, in anything. I wonder about it all the time. I even wondered about it in Lake Tahoe, swimming in that freezing water. So I've got these two closing lyrics here. And one is called A Million Jewels. Scramble down from the highway, the water cold even at the surface, maybe 65. You have to be gutsy to dive in, relief from a baking September sun, where the edge numbs your feet, but you pebble wade, crouch, then ease in, begin to crawl like mad, splashing and yowling along the sun-drenched surface, sparkling with a million jewels. You turn a ways out, tread water, and notice then how 6 feet under, it's doubly freezing. Your toes and shins and knees know the difference, your thighs and genitals too. Touched with a shock, a glimpse of icy dread, like truth, clear, unembroidered, unfiltered, kept at bay, the truth just beneath understanding, pristine, vast, uninformed by human feeling or animal nurture, where the bones touch an ice age, and though you yourself come from the sea, you feel the dark mouth of all that cold bone, and you shiver at the chill, the sheer space, an ancient creature watching from far below. You've come to recreate, you've come to recreate across a lake so large that when you look across it, you can sense the curvature of the earth. So deep, the Empire State Building's effortlessly swallowed within it. Staying at the surface, swimming parallel to shore, sun on the shoulders, heart steady pounding, you begin to lose yourself, but you swim right where it holds you, warm like a mammal against its skin. Okay, I'm going to read this last one. Is that okay? It's 3:05.
Sure, go ahead.
So I love to write about music and gardens. I always have. So here's a closing poem called Summer. It's for Becky. So thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to share poetry. I really appreciate it since it's new, and it's a really important feeling to share new work. And I love so many of you who I've seen out there. I wish we could hang out. Summer for Becky. Tomato vines, they make their own microclimes, jungles. You reach into who knows where to find each fecund fruit, chocolate stripe, heirloom crim, sun gold cluster, hung down inside like grapes, sweetmeats, bell trees. In the middle of such a barren suburb, you killed that half lawn well, on purpose. And in its place, ringing hearts, cucumbers tucked under like covered canoes, spiked skins, gentle in the wide-leafed, icy whisper shade of vines. Fragrant basil exploded to seed, leeks and onions flourishing down and up, asparagus, corn silks, and the dark sunflowers lift and stretch and turn. And how do you grow such a garden, sister? All that pure compost and fierce heat. Each vine nourishes like oxygen. These leaves are breathing, and the squash and beans and corn are also sisters. And your compassion also breath. Bean sprouts right out the time when they are vulnerable and grow just enough each day to create themselves, subsumed in danger as they are. Will you hear this thanks and praise, the color and gender of the heart? Will we rescue each other from the fire? Love is real here. Among beetles, worms, honeybees, the signature of leaves and the whisper of old friends, sun refracted as if the soul had limbs, tongue, fingers, and you could taste and feel how sweet you are, how nourishing and strong and kind. That's all I got.
Wonderful, Ken. Thank you. Thank you. It's, I was thinking, as the drawing to close of summer, and yes, it has been a strange year and a strange summer, but you did have your birds there in the urban wildland interface, and you could celebrate your freedom there, and you did it by way of these poems. And thank you for sharing all new work with us. That's just wonderful. I loved your line at the beginning of one of your poems, or within one of your poems, everything is hunger. And I think that's been a heightened status for us this summer, this year. I think what we do is we, notwithstanding the fires, notwithstanding the turmoil around us, we do move into what you so well said, be prone to silence the way a forest keeps time. And we can connect with that sort of timelessness of it. And I look over at George Lober, and he's got a photograph there of what's coming. Autumn, the leaves, we'll have winter, and we'll have time for drawing in and replenishing ourselves and starting another summer and planting more tomatoes, and you can get back into Lake Tahoe and swim a bit there. So thank you. Thank you both. I think it's been a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for giving us your poetry. Our next reading is Sunday, November 8th. It'll be via Zoom. And Ed Jarvis and Simon Hunt will be with us. Simon's on today. And so it's going to be a wonderful afternoon also. Please stay tuned. We are on Facebook as the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium. So please check us out there. And please let us know if you have any thoughts or questions. And do stay in touch. Do check out the Facebook page. And I guess probably most important, certainly as important as anything else we would be doing, if you haven't already done so, please go and vote. It's time to do that if you haven't already. This is a very singular moment in our lives and in our country's history and in the world's history, really. So thank you again. It's been great to have you. We look forward to seeing some or all or more of you next month. And thanks again to John Lowy for being our dean and our guide and for drawing all of us together here. You guys take care, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.